All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of our It's Your Move video podcast, or podcast video, whichever one you experience it with. And I'm here with the good sir, Werner Vos.
The good sir.
Yeah, I'm going to try to change them every week.
I realize.
Because honorable you did not
No,
like.
yeah. Good sir, okay.
Honorable you did not like, so good sir. Welcome back.
If you want to date my daughter, you can call me good sir, but otherwise you're good. Yes.
Clearly, there's dating happening in the Vos household, but we won't go there. We're going to dive into reading the Bible supernaturally. We're into part 4, which is exciting because that's usually when the season starts to get really interesting. Is around this part of a episodes, a series.
Yes.
And so this Sunday we spoke about this idea of savoring the joy.
Yes.
At least that's how I understood it. But before we recorded this, you said that's not what you were trying to get at. So maybe help me out.
Well, I know that the question was, what is joy, or define joy? And is joy an element of savoring? Most probably yes, but joy is savoring. So savoring is connecting yourself to that joy, if you may. So now Jesus says, so that my joy will be in you and your joy will be complete. So what it is that the joy that Jesus experienced, we will experience. If we see, we will savor it.
Okay, say it one more time. So the joy that Jesus experienced,
Yes.
we will experience.
Yes.
If we see and then savor.
Correct.
Got you. Okay. All right. That's not what I understood. Okay, but this idea of the joy ultimately is what it is that we can savor. Is that a fair, or have I gone back?
No, it's a little bit interchangeable.
Okay.
So listen, joy, delight, and savoring, in many ways it's the same thing.
Sure. Okay.
The interesting thing would be that Jesus actually said it. In other words, where we have been speaking about it as a possible insight into what the scriptures are saying.
Sure. Okay.
That we need to savor. And we can see things like the Psalm 27:4, one thing I ask, that I'll dwell now for all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. So what does that mean? Gaze upon the beauty. What am I doing? Why am I gazing upon the beauty?
Sure.
As I'm savoring. And now Jesus actually in both those texts explicitly say it, that my joy will be in you.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, he could have said that my love would be in you. He could have said that my faith would be in you. He could have said a number of things. My peace be in you. And obviously there are texts where he says, my peace I leave with you. But that he actually uses the word joy, I find very interesting.
Sure. Okay, I never thought about it that way. That gives me a clearer perspective or picture of what it is that you were painting. So it's this idea that it's not just a byproduct, but there is something that can be savored, and again, interchangeably using the word, but there is this thing that Jesus is giving us fully through his word, through our experience of being able to read the scriptures.
Yes, so let's go to what we said on Sunday in the passage of the 4 points in terms of, okay, so one is my joy, so we will have the joy of Jesus. We can have the joy of Jesus. What is the joy of Jesus? It's ultimately his joy in his relationship with the Father, that he delights in the Father, okay? And that our joy can be full,
sure,
because it's not, and that process is mediated through the reading of the scriptures.
Got you.
So what is joy? We obviously think we all want to be joyful, or we would rather use the word happy. But the joy that Jesus was experiencing seems to be ultimately not the only joy, but the ultimate joy is joy in the Father. Even that text where he says that for the joy set before him, I think it's in Hebrews, what was the joy set before him? Why did he endure the cross for the joy set before him? Is to be with the Father, to be in the presence of the Father, to be in a relationship with the Father without any constraints.
Wow.
As he was currently having, let's say, in human form. So that is the ultimate joy, and we get to experience, participate That's something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Participate in the joy that he has through the Father through reading the scriptures.
Yeah. Sure. Anyway, I really enjoy these conversations because as you were speaking, I realized. I'm trying to get words around it, but the mind blowing thing for me is that this goes back to the idea of relationship. So this is not somewhat not a new revelation in the sense of God's focus is the relationship. God's focus is the loving union. God's focus is the we are all connected. But that's actually what Christ was pursuing. That's actually what was the completeness for Christ was, man, I get to be in this divine dance. And what you're saying is we get to participate, or what you're exposing through the scriptures, whatever words you want to use for it, is we get to participate in that same deep, intimate relationship today.
Yes.
By opening the Bible.
Correct.
Sure. I don't know, that needs to sink in for me, at least. Because
it's a deep theological point. And that's why I said on Sunday again, I would hope that people understand if they don't, because everyone's busy, but hope that they go and think back to what's being said and maybe go and listen to it again. Is because what I'm insinuating here then is that there could be a different way of looking at creation. As to why did God create the world and people in it? Could it be then participation in this relationship? So in other words, that the idea of perichoresis is this divine dance or circular dance where the Father, Son, and Spirit is in perfect unity, harmony, love. It's giving and receiving joy, love, whatever. It's going to sound weird, but ecstasy almost. And saying that we don't just want to keep this to ourselves, we want to bring others into it. Okay?
Sure.
And so let us create humanity and let's create for them a place to live and be called Earth. Originally the Garden of Eden, and that they can experience with us and with one another this divine dance and this relationship. That in my mind would be the strong possibility of Eden.
Sure.
And what we are returning to in new creation is having that experience and having that relationship that is obviously mediated through the Word and through the Spirit. And the Spirit is Jesus' Spirit, God's Spirit, and it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
But the idea for us to experience that. Now, what I also mentioned on Sunday, I'm not sure if people heard it, is the idea of that what is sin then? Sin is a resistance to the divine dance, to participation. So the things that Jesus or the scriptures commands us to, calls us to, whatever, to stay away from or to embrace are things that will either enhance this joy in the dance or take away from it.
Sure.
Where we obviously feel from our worldview that there's a list of rights and wrongs, do's and don'ts, and if you do, you get rewarded, and if you don't, you get punished.
I'm gonna come back to that, but there's something that you said that struck me that I think might be cool to think about. So are you saying, and would this be right thinking in the line of this conversation, that ultimately because the Spirit is in the divine dance and Jesus is the Word, right? He's the Word that became flesh.
Yes.
He's in that divine dance, that actually they are actively pulling us into that dance through this idea of reading and prayer and...
Correct, but there are things that have... The power of sin prevents us from being in the dance.
Yes, yeah.
Fully.
Yeah.
Okay, we can put our foot in the dance.
Sure.
Or our toe. But Jesus came to break the power and hold that sin has over us so that we can participate in the dance. And obviously we don't have to used that language, meaning that language, as I shared, came out in the 4th century. People started talking about this perichoresis idea.
Yeah.
And that's just language to describe something where the word's not in the Bible.
Yes, yeah.
It's people trying to make sense of what it is that they're seeing. So they sense this triune God that we very rarely actually speak about in terms of, and I purposefully put it in the series to say the supreme worth and beauty of our triune God. Because I often wrestle with that when I speak. Do I say that, God's awesome, Jesus is awesome, the Spirit's awesome, who's awesome? Which one are we tackling now? And I thought, well, why don't I just throw it together and put it in the triune God? But so these guys are wrestling with it. They're trying to make sense of it. How do these three work together? They can't put practical terms to it, and eventually lands up in, like I said, this word from the Greek theater, perichoresis, to try and describe it. So put it under a different name,
Sure.
Whatever. But here's something that I read that sort of stuck with me. It's basically saying, in the beginning, there was relationship.
Yeah.
The relationship of the triune God,
Yes.
outside of humanity.
Yes.
So in the beginning was relationship. And then God creates to draw into that relationship. But inevitably there are things that distorts or hurts the relationship with one another and with God.
Yes.
And these are the things that Jesus came to free us from that power, and God give us the guidance as to what will lead to enhanced relationship and ultimately joy. Because there's joy in relationship.
Yes.
Because that's the joy that he's talking about, the joy in the Father, not the joy, I have a jet ski joy. I can have a jet ski joy, and God even gives us jet skis for joy. He
Yes.
richly blesses us with many things for our enjoyment. But that's not the joy we're talking about. We're talking about the ultimate joy.
Which is relationship.
Exactly. With God, with the triune God, with
the
our
triune
triune
God.
God. Yes.
And that is mediated, I like the word, that's experienced through us being able to read the Bible supernaturally.
Supernaturally. So with eyes that can see. Now, a couple of things. We'll still get to, I've now started with supernaturally, but you have to read naturally before you can read supernaturally. In other words, I have to actually be able to read and understand the text to even make sure that am I reading the right thing. Okay, so I'll say that. And I'll also say, obviously, one of the reasons we're having this podcast, where I originally started with James and myself, is we have these offline conversations. Even now, before we started, you asked me something and I said, why don't we just press record and then we can figure it out together. Is to draw people into the conversation. And I'm definitely not saying that my view on things is the view, the only view, that view, that view.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, here is a view that others before us have had, and that I'm getting my head around. That still fits into the Garden Project, if you may. It's all still intertwined for me. And as I've said before, where I see truth not necessarily as static, but as fluid and as evolving and as God exposing more and more. So I feel like in my own world view, as the years roll by, God is exposing more truth and elements, and they're not necessarily in opposition to each other. Some have been in opposition to what I thought before, but some is actually just inclusive and wider as to how all of this makes more sense than being part of a religion.
Yeah. Sure. And I guess that's the journey that we all have to go on.
Correct.
Right? That as we talk about, and I think that's for me why I enjoy these conversations so much, is because I realize, fortunately, the road potentially ahead of me is much shorter than the road behind me, and so I've got a lot of learning and growing that I get to do. But it's like, sure, there's actually so much out there that some of these concepts I definitely don't fully wrap my head around, but I'm able to hear these and have these conversations and feel like, oh my goodness, there is still so much more.
Yes.
That whereas when I was 13, 14 and a Kingdom kid and I watched people read the same book for 30 years, I couldn't understand why. Like, surely you learn the book, you know the book, and you like at school, we pass an exam and you move on. But what these conversations and what this, especially this series has shown me, is that there's actually so much more to this incredible book.
And what I'm trying to encourage us to do is to expand our minds, okay? To think, to be more uncertain. Okay, so historically for me, I've wanted to be certain. I've mentioned it before about everything. I wanted to know that there's nothing that I don't know when it comes to Christianity, faith, God's expectation of us in the relationship, what have you.
Yeah.
Okay, and that I will not be surprised, if you may, as I was 30 years ago when I first learned what a follower of Jesus is. But I realize more and more that is impossible because there is a mystery about God, and we have our lives to pursue this mystery as to who God is and as to what it means to be in a relationship with Him. And when we get to exact certainty, it becomes mechanical instead of a relationship that continues to evolve and grow in insight and understanding. And those basic things were very basic and needed to be basic, and that's what the scriptures also talks about, that there was milk. It says, but now you need solid food. There was training wheels, whatever, but we have to keep on evolving in our relationship with God that is connected to the scriptures, meaning the scriptures is what guides us there.
Yeah.
So insight into the scriptures is insight into God. And the relationship with God, who God is, who Jesus is, who the Spirit is. Yeah, I don't want to overly complicate it all. I'll just say that there's a mystery. It's okay to not be certain. It is okay to change your mind. It is okay to be a little bit at sea, drifting from the harbor and then trying to make your way back and exploring new coastlines. Versus this is exactly in the box how it fits, and I'm safe, I feel safe and I feel secure because I'm in the box, but I'm only safe in my mind because I'm actually missing out on God, who He is and what He is doing.
Yeah. So there's so much to see and there's so much to savor.
Correct.
Amen. I think we'll drop there. That is
Amen.
very
That's it. Hope that I didn't cause now more confusion than insight, but I will go back and say again, have conversation, talk to one another. You do not necessarily have to be right. We are sharing thoughts.
Yeah.
We are exploring. We are not fighting.
Sure.
Or I'm right, you're wrong, or what have you. We're talking.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.